Hello, everyone. How are you? Good? Yeah. My name is Eric Chen. I'm the General and Artistic Director for the New Institute, where you are now, the Netherlands National Museum and Institute for Architecture, Design, and Digital Culture. And I'd like to welcome all of you here tonight for this lecture by Paul Gerretsen of Deltametropolis and other speakers to launch off a new series of lectures by the Ukraine-Netherlands Urban Networks. Just a few words. I mean, of course, we all noticed, and I think we're heartened in a sort of perverse way in February when Russia invaded Ukraine by the mobilization of support that arose here and in other parts of Europe and the world for Ukraine. In our field, Alexander Shevchenko and others, AIR, Independent School for the City, already had begun a collaboration with designers and architects in the Ukraine to discuss how we could sort of collaborate and help in the rebuilding effort. Of course, you know, this is something that we in the Netherlands perhaps can have something that we can contribute, especially here in Rotterdam, a city that of course knows what happens when a city is largely destroyed, but also a city that knows how to rebuild in a process that one can argue is still ongoing, and that we can continue to learn from in retrospect as well. Now, it's really great that we can continue, that we can help Alexandra and others continue this effort here tonight. I think as you know, we here at the New Institute, we're very fortunate to have one of the speakers, Alexander Shevchenko, as a speaker for the World Around series of talks that we hosted back in June, and it's great to have him back tonight with others. Maybe I should just briefly mention that, as an aside, that we are also hosting now the exhibition for the Prix de Rome Architecture Prize this year, and the winner, which was announced here in this room a few weeks ago, is Lizia Topolnik, who is a Ukrainian designer who was looking at the site of the shooting down of Flight MH17 as a site of healing. So on that note, you know, as the war in Ukraine crosses the 300-day mark, and as the people of Ukraine face a very probably long and cold winter with a devastated infrastructure, it's really great to know that at least here in this room, we are continuing to find ways to support and contribute in the long term. There's going to be a lot said tonight, so I'm going to stop here, except to say thank you to our collaborators on this event, Alexandra and the College of Rex Advisors, and I will turn things over to our moderators tonight, Alexandra and Saskia Nafs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for hosting us here. And I will just say a few words about Ukraine-Netherlands Urban Network, which is basically a network of architects, urban planners, like stadsmakers, both from Netherlands and Ukraine. And we started this discussion and used this time to prepare for the reconstruction, because of course we cannot do it now while the war is still there. But we can use this time to go through these discussions and preparations, knowledge exchange, and networking.
I would also like to thank you all for coming tonight, and also a warm welcome to all the people that are watching from home. I know there's quite a few of you. Very good of you to join us. My name is Saskia Nafs. I work for Board of Government Advisors, or College van Rijksadviseurs for those who know Dutch. I will be your moderator for tonight together with Alexandra. My role will be quite modest, I think, tonight. We will leave as much room as possible for the speakers. We have 3 speakers tonight. The first is Paul Gerretsen from the Vereniging Deltametropolis, or Deltametropolis Association in English. He will start tonight. After that, we will have a short Q&A with the other 2 speakers of this evening, Nazar Kovalenko and Alexander Shevchenko. After the short Q&A intermission, we will go directly to Nazar's presentation, and after that Alexander's presentation. And both of these presentations have been pre-recorded so that we wouldn't have any hassle tonight with electricity glitches or internet not working. So their presentations have been pre-recorded, but they are with us online the whole time. And after the third presentation, so that's Alexander's presentation, Alexandra will lead the discussion between the three speakers. And also we would like to welcome you very much to join the discussion if you have a question or a remark or something you would like to say. We also have with us tonight Tijn, who played a very big part in organizing this evening, so thank you very much. And he's also taking care of the chat, so for people who are watching online and also want to contribute in some way, you can post your remarks or your questions in the chat, and Tijn will make sure that we know if there are any pressing questions. So having said that, I think we can...
One more remark.
Okay.
From our experience on the previous events, if anybody in the audience that are not comfortable stel de vraag, asking question in English, you can also do it in Ukrainian or Russian, and I will translate it for audience. Yes, we could start with that.
Okay, Paul, please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks also for the introduction. It's an honor and privilege to be the first one kicking off this series, so I'm really hoping I can fit the bill. I was even struggling a little bit to find a title for this lecture, so it's not there, but now I just looked up my notes and I thought, hey, wait a minute, there's something in the quote that I will end the evening with that might be a good title, and that's a quote from Timothy Snyder, whom I also will begin with, and he says what we really need is a future. So perhaps that's a good thought to have as a title. Like I said, I want to start this evening with a small part of a lecture of Timothy Snyder, professor at Yale, from his 23-part lecture series, The Making of Modern Ukraine. Compulsory food for thought, I think, for everyone. I enjoyed watching it along with about 1.5 million other people. So it's really worthwhile to look into. And I want to have just a tiny bit of an opening by him from his final, next to final, so the 22nd lecture, so the last to final lecture from his series. And in that he is talking about Kiev.
Is that we're looking, okay, two more points, indulge me. We're looking at a new centrality of Kiev. That Kiev is something that hasn't been before. It's a Kiev which is asserting itself as a kind of as a European capital. Kiev has been many things, but a European capital among other European capitals in a modern sense is new, and a proud Kiev is something new. And I'm going to read a poem from Stus, which is about Soviet Kiev, and you'll see why I'm doing this. It's thousand-year-old Kiev, and this is translated by Bogdan Tokarsky and William Blocker. 1,000-year-old Kiev fancied feeling young again. Suddenly Kiev was aware of hotels, trolleybuses, trams and trains, the Patton Bridge, the ungainly buildings on Tereshchatyk. Kiev licked the rough asphalt with its pagan tongue. The slopes of the Green Theater became overrun by martens, squirrels, or rocks, and the Godyarillo's roaring heathen laughter drove the Dniepro's waves. Kiev coughed asthmatically through the metro's drafts. The electric trains fearfully rattled. As a dozen layers of ground, white from human bones, horses' skulls, the gray ash of funeral pyres, rippled like the skull of an angry bull's neck. Kiev strained but then gave up. just how the devil to lift this whole assemblage of new builds, avenues, motorways, and the stately birthless bellies of the inhabitants. May sacred forces strike you down, heathen Kiev hurled a curse. But then it saw a pack of pioneers, and ashamed it bowed its head and hid itself away without a peep. Pioneers, you have to know, pioneers means communist youth group, right? So Kiev finally submits. That Kiev is now gone, right? The people who are now in charge of the government in Kiev, the people who are now in charge of culture in Kiev, are of a different generation that isn't just post-Soviet or anti-Soviet, it's just something else. And the very last point that I wanted to make.
So, actually played at 80% speed, so you can imagine how it is when played normally. You can just about follow him reciting this poem, and also declaring basically a change in culture. I think that's a very important point to make. And it is also a point that I think we can learn from in the Netherlands. Personally, I can say that I've experienced this to see that there is possibilities actually to be looked for. So I will try to continue a little bit from the perspective of the Netherlands. We were speaking about a 1,000-year-old Kiev. The Netherlands, I'm afraid, doesn't go back that far. Well, perhaps, of course, it does, a little bit as a swamp. Plinius wrote about it, I think, a place to avoid. Please stay away from there as much as you can until around about the 16th or 17th century, when actually the Netherlands became a little bit as it is at the moment still, perhaps. The importance of this territorial dimension for the Dutch culture has been made quite vividly clear in painting of that period, and of course with the depiction of maps shown in paintings as well, showing both the importance of the seafaring nation itself, but also positioning itself, acknowledging who it is. You can see it even better in one of the first maps made of the Netherlands by cartographer Jacob van Deventer, showing Holland, so part of the Netherlands, tilted sideways, as you can see, as a constellation of cities interconnected by infrastructure of waterways. So basically, the structure we still have and know, not one large center, but rather a group of cities interconnected, based on a strong trading culture, of course mixed a little bit with imperial tendencies. Much of the wealth from this nation actually stems from this period. I think we have to acknowledge that. I think it's also important to understand that the way we used our territory has very much to do with this fact. Also looking at another landscape picture by Jacob van Ruisdael, showing the landscape of the Netherlands when at its birth, basically, of its current being, the city and the countryside, shown as the view on Haarlem, actually from the dunes looking downwards towards the city. And as you can see, the fields used in front of the dunes are not used for feeding the urban population, but of course are used for something which is much more valuable. So rather than producing food on the land, it would produce luxury goods like bleaching the linen, for instance, in this case. So in a way, you can understand the Netherlands as a very organized country in which every square meter was used to its utmost advantage, having been taken for a large part from this swampy area, it had to be useful at most during all of that time. If we take a big step towards the second period, subsequent period, you could say, of great wealth, it's the moment when the discovery of natural gas in the north of the Netherlands was created in the 1960s. A picture from Slochteren at the moment when, quite proudly actually, we're coming in with new tubing, tubes for natural gas in order to supply energy to all of our homes, and also energy for cooking food, and basically, of course, also to sell it at large profits, which could then be again invested into this country, and therefore also quite a lot of control on how this country could be developed. So in this post-war period, a quite emblematic map that is actually also upstairs in our office. Eirik is bumping into it every day, more or less. Of course, it's a copy, but it's a quite rather good copy. Famous map of the second memorandum of planning for the Netherlands, in which it's very clearly shown how, with all of this wealth, it would be able to direct growth in a way that would be most profitable. And basically two elements were very important in it. First of all, it is one of creating actually not too large cities, so containing urban growth, creating rather small, medium-sized cities, avoiding large metropolitan cities like London or Paris, but creating very smaller cities. And in that sense also actively encouraging the growth of satellite cities that would allow for growth coming from the population growth in that period. And the other side of it, creating agricultural land, a large agricultural complex, second to little actually if you look at the current agricultural produce of the Netherlands, in that sense perhaps a little bit similar to Ukraine agriculture being very important in the Netherlands, and also land had to be secured for that, and that was directly connected to actually the catastrophe of hunger from the Second World War, where actually we would never want to have that again, and we would sort of allow for us to be fed from our own soil. So basically you could say the Netherlands as a quite well-organized state. From that period onwards, actually the country has shifted up and down from the perspective at which it developed. A quite well-known comparison made by Daan Zandveld, our previous state advisor from his graduation project, actually proclaimed at the beginning of this century that the Netherlands should not be seen as a country, rather as a city. And if you make this kind of comparison, you would understand perhaps that it is a large city structure in which roughly the same amount of people as large metropolitan regions like New York or Los Angeles live, but in a different kind of setting, actually. For convenience, I just tried a little bit of homework to see what Kiev would do on that kind of comparison. Perhaps even a little bit more comparable in terms of urban structure, but of course that is just if you look at it this way. So basically, this idea of the Netherlands as as a quite urbanized country, but well-contained urbanized country, is something that is actually of a central point I would like to make. Our organization, the Deltametropolis Association, actually originated from the same period when this question of whether the Netherlands should be seen as a country or as rather as a big metropolitan system was in debate. And actually, I think rather we're still in that kind of period. So basically, our association was founded at the beginning of the century by the 4 major cities as a platform for thinking about the future and to indulge in this question of the development of this area. Second point I want to go into is that of order. Actually, spatial planning in Dutch is actually called, literally translated, spatial order. So we speak about ruimtelijke ordening and not about spatial planning per se. So I think that's a very interesting fact that you can look at. So literally the act of ordering all functions, the act of using all available space as efficiently as possible. Some years ago, photographer and graphic designer Jorrit Kluitman, we collaborated with him. He went on his bike from the city of Eindhoven to show the graphical beauty that actually this kind of ordering gave way to. He photographed all of the 300 or so municipalities, and of course he found beauty as a graphic designer in all of these straight lines of the dikes, the levees, the precision curvature of roads, or even when necessary, creating a wobbly forest path, if as such that would be more fitting within a forest. Of course, this also says something about the size and scale of the Netherlands. You can indeed reach all of its sites by bike if you really want to, it allows itself to be photographed quite well. This fixation on order stands perhaps in stark contrast to the somewhat chaotic nature of, for example, the way the Ukrainians use their balconies. I recently saw on advice of Vita, actually, I looked at a very interesting small documentary, Enters Through the Balcony, which is precisely about how Ukrainians use their balconies as an extra space actually as part of their changing of their relatively quite ordered Soviet apartments. Of course, in the Netherlands, so in order to show their own identity, people change their balconies in the way they want to show them. Identity in the Netherlands, when it comes to this thinking, actually has another form. You could say similarly to the bike paths we saw in the picture of Jorrit, sort of organized variation is something we managed quite well in the Phoenix period, which was actually a name which points to another planning memorandum of the 4th memorandum, extra actually. And in this period, we managed to build a lot of new homes in a very efficient way, concrete tunneling form constructions, and creating actually the best sellable average home which was possible. The role of the architect changed to that of dressing it up and creating this kind of variation which was thought for in order to project some sort of identity. And of course, as one can expect, within all of these limitations, there's still endless amount of variations possible. And this, of course, is something that we're quite well known for. This form of order and also the way we've looked at planning from precisely that period, so from 1995 onwards until 2015, led to the idea that actually the Netherlands was finished. We could maintain it as it is, we could tweak it here and there, and that would be it. Basically an end of history narrative. We don't have to think any further. We've figured it out, we've came to the conclusion, and we've managed it all the way. And of course, this form of order and subsequent conclusion that the Netherlands was finished led to the dissolving of both the ministries of planning and housing. But more importantly, I think it has also led to the absence of a feeling of urgency towards critical things that are necessary to change. And as you may well know, and if I zoom out a little bit, the Netherlands, for example, has a huge nitrogen crisis at the moment. It helps to zoom out. This is satellite imagery showing nitrogen in Europe. Perhaps you can also see Kiev on the map. But as you quite well recognize, the Netherlands has a problem that is hard to avoid on such a map. And of course, this is not only as in terms of its visuals quite dramatic. It also has a quite severe impact on our natural environment. And if you look at the statistics, Netherlands is really at the end of all of the statistics of Europe in terms of its biodiversity and natural systems. Not only, by the way, because of its pollution, very clearly shows also the graphs in blue that actually most of loss has to do actually with spatial planning and not with pollution. And of course, I mean, I can continue on this line for a long way, but also, for instance, if you look at sustainable energy production, the Netherlands is not doing very well. Statistics from 2018, last in line. And of course, I think if you look at these statistics, it's quite clear that the Netherlands is not the best boy in the classroom, as we say in the Netherlands, rather the opposite. And it's striking when it comes to another kind of statistics I want to show you, that actually this is not felt very directly by its population. So look at this just before the pandemic climate action map. Where can I join my next climate strike? Well, in the Netherlands, it's quite hard to find your location. So there's no sense of urgency within the population coming from, I would argue, the idea that actually everything is well taken care of, we have it all under control, it's just a little bit of tweaking here and there, and then we will be able to fix it forever. And of course, I think the most Dutch will know actually in this hall that by this time, actually the government hardly makes any changes. It will only make changes if it's ordered to do so by court cases, and this is quite serious, I would say. So order all is well, but I would say be careful what you wish for. So my third point is innovation. Third point about innovation, and here I don't mean the kind of innovation that is now suggested for coping with this nitrogen crisis that I just showed you the picture from, the special automatic floors, for example, or the Discovery 120 collector from Lely, taking care of separating the fluid and solid excrements of our cows, and that would be the big solution for our nitrogen problem. I don't think so, but perhaps it's not the kind of innovation I would like to talk about. Rather, maybe step back a little bit again. 1985, my predecessor and founder of the Deltametropolis Association, actually Dirk Vrieling, came up with this basically statement proclaiming that actually the Netherlands had to be able to rethink about itself. Nederland nu als ontwerp. The Netherlands now as a design. Basically, he's talking about much of the same topics that we have to deal with now, still, I would say. Ecologische overbelasting, so ecological problems, economic stagnation, but maybe perhaps most importantly, cultural impasse. So basically, the problem that we cannot think about our future any longer. In 1985, he thought this was such an important problem that he had to do something about it. And in order to cope with that, he started this process in which he managed to create an atelier to think about the future of the Netherlands again, from the perspective that you can create a future that perhaps you want. Looking at the Netherlands from different scales, involving all kinds of designers and design offices, even including the latest technology in order to go through all of the possible outcomes of that kind of designs, and having a lot of media attention for it as well, in order to have a conversation with a general audience, with the large parts of the public, and have them want to think about the future again. Using scenario techniques, looking at big differences between possible futures, politically laden actually futures that he created, and ending with a big exhibition at the Beurs van Berlage. By the way, all material which is now in the possession of the archive of HNI. So I'm quite happy with these pictures because I had a hard time finding them, but they are in the archive to be found here. So as a way of expressing and thinking about the future, and being involved with that in a public atmosphere. In 2017, we as an association tried on a much smaller scale something similar, looking at the energy system, cooperating with landscape designers, urban designers, and universities. We tried to reimagine the energy system of the Netherlands, not based on fossil fuels, but rather based on sustainable energy productions. And what would that mean spatially? What kind of outcome would that have? Would it be possible to change our fossil-based energy structure to a sustainably based energy structure within the very limited time scope we had? Would it be possible? After a couple of months of hard work and collaboration, we managed to create a scenario which looked at that future, and indeed it was possible to do this. There is an option of creating your own energy in the Netherlands. It's quite well possible. We looked through all the details, and if certain choices would have been made, it would be possible to actually create a country that you could still long for. So not with windmills on every street corner. And of course, we managed to also hand it over to the, at that time, most important man of the Netherlands, who was actually creating the climate agreement at that time. And so we were quite happy with the outcome at that moment. But subsequently, nothing happened. So I think it's very true to the nature of this day and age we're in. as a country, well organized, looking like we've been able to manage everything, but actually in reality, not much changes. Of course, I want to stop at a sort of lighter note. We've also worked at National Environmental Vision a couple of years ago, which is now slowly getting into place and starting to be worked out and being executed. And of course, in that sense, you can also feel that there actually is some sort of tendency to change something. This is the base map that we created for that planning document. And of course, it shows the same tilted Netherlands as we've seen before, but also shows how fragile it is in relationship to the sea and the rivers, and all of this urbanization which is showed into this low-lying part of the Netherlands. Last experience I want to share with you is one which is actually quite the opposite of what I showed before, of thinking about the Netherlands as a whole, thinking about it in sort of structures that can be changed, but rather trying to turn it around and see if you can find to do it in another way. Together with the what's it called? It's together with the Creative Industry Fund. Actually, money was made available to local municipalities and small groups of people wanting to change something in their surroundings, but etched on the same kind of transition questions that were addressed in this planning memorandum that I showed the base map from, leading to 133 projects everywhere around the country in all kinds of different settings, leading to all kinds of conversations around these kinds of settings. By the way, this is also staged a little bit. This was done by Rufus de Vries as a photographer, part of the project team, enacting people to change something and therefore actually making them change their behavior, looking at how deep actually the water level is at the moment, and experiencing by themselves what kind of change is necessary and needed. Hopefully, of course, this will lead to some sort of change, this being our new Minister for Spatial Planning and the Vice Minister for Culture, getting this publication with the results of that trajectory. So basically, I would like to end with what I started with Timothy Snyder's. A quote from a podcast with Ezra Klein, the Ezra Klein Show, actually very worthwhile to listen to also. And he says the following: so thinking forward from this crisis, we should be thinking about things conceptually now. This was a hydrocarbon war. If it weren't for a certain hydrocarbon oligarch, Vladimir Putin, there wouldn't have been this war. But there's a deeper lesson about the structure of, for example, the energy system, which we need to be getting to as well. Because of the horror of the way Mr. Putin uses the past, those kind of logical extremes to which he pushes that, it reminds us that what we really need is a future. And that democratic politics can't be just about defense. If democratic politics is about to be continued, it has to practice which is aimed towards the future. And there are lots of bad ideas, but if we're going to have a future, we're going to have to start thinking about different ways that things could turn around. And if the Ukrainians have given us anything, it's that they've bought us that time, right? I feel that every day that they stay on the battlefield buys us a week, a month, a year of thinking about how things could be. Thanks to the fact that they're doing something, they've given us the chance to think bigger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You want to take a seat?
Yeah, we will have we will use this moment in between two parts of our event to ask questions. So if there is anybody in the audience that have already a question to Paul, please raise your hand. Not yet. Maybe anybody from you guys, Alexander or Nazar, have you got any questions so far?
Good test to see if the sound is working.
Yeah.
Can you say something, Alexander?
No, so far I don't have a question, but
Okay.
eventually I will.
Then maybe I will start. Oh, great.
I'd like to ask your opinion about urban planning in Ukraine and the way of thinking of Ukrainians in this field.
Sorry?
I would like to ask you your opinion about urban planning in Ukraine and the way Ukrainians plan their cities.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would like to answer that, but I don't know much about it actually. It would be something I would need to study first, and I would be delighted to learn more about it actually.
Maybe we could come back to this question after presentation
Exactly,
from
yeah.
Alexander and Nazar. So you will have a bit more overview on what's happening. But from your lecture, I noticed that you've been trying to make these changes since 1998. And as you said, still not much happening. And also is what we saw at the ERBR, the last ERBR exhibition, that still not much happening. And you said that you tried two ways. One was more top-down, like getting in these big systems, getting to the governmental level, and also trying to do it bottom-up with the smaller municipalities and initiatives. And since we are now starting our thoughts and our how we are going to change it, so how not to fall in the same trap that you did, like keep talking and not doing anything with that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's good to say that it's not all that bleak. Huh? So yes, things have and are starting to change, and there is some sort of momentum. I think many people understand that the way things are organized now, this cannot be continued. And actually, the urgency coming from our territorial position is also quite vivid. So being at the coast, being very low-lying country, actually protected by many dikes and levees, and if this would not be there, we would already be gone. So people understand that things really need to change. So I do see changes happening. Of course, like the easy answer is, but that's also quite true, is that you need both directions. You need a systemic view of how a country, an urban setting functions, and there are some sort of logics to it, but it is as important to create the atmosphere to be able to think about the future. So I'm always very much inspired by Nederland Nu als ontwerp as a way of creating the possibilities to think about that far future, and I think it's definitely something that I can advise to do, and that was actually organized on both the national level and the regional level and the very local level, with all of these elements sort of interacting with each other.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is one more question. I think I need to take out my
Thank you.
glasses. I don't.
My name is Julie Lawson. I have a question about the role of urban planning in more distributional questions about even development or opportunities to access creative lives or education or get to work. And we've seen in Kiev there's been an enormous concentration of economic development in the finance and real estate sector, incredible concentration there. But there were ideas in the Netherlands in the past decades that were concerned with distributional questions and even development. Did we lose that way of thinking? And do you think it's important, given the many cities in Ukraine, and there will be very uneven, if you like, capabilities to get up to make sure that everyone has a good home for the future?
Yes, good question. Yes, I think we've lost it, but we are regaining that quite quickly, actually, at the moment. Also because we now look at it from a different perspective. So when you emphasize the economic growth, then actually the redistribution of functions is not always the good thing to do. But if you look at it from the perspective of how actually a country as a whole should function and be able to function and provide for its inhabitants, it's another story. As you've seen from the comparison in scale, the Netherlands is rather a sort of Kiev metropolitan area in terms of its comparison. So when we talk about redistribution of functions, I'm always a little bit chuckling because it's like, yeah, it's not that far. As we've seen from Jorrit, you can literally bike around the whole country if you really want to. So basically, much more than in the Netherlands, I think it's definitely an issue to take into consideration. At this moment, right at this moment, we're actually looking at it together with the Ministry of Economic Affairs, which has seen a huge swing back to looking at actually what kind of potential different regions have and actually catering to that potential and allowing for the differences, while at the same time seeing that everybody has access to some sort of change and that it's not only big cities. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we will leave the other questions for after the other two presentations, if you don't mind, to hold on to your questions a little bit longer. Thank you very much, Paul. I think you also need a little break from speaking, but we will have you back later. Yeah. We will now proceed with Nazar's presentation. And Nazar Kovalenko, he is the director of Municipal Enterprise Institute for Urban Development, by far the longest name of tonight, but I hope I said it correctly. So let's listen to Nazar, and afterwards we'll go, without a break in between, we'll go straight to Alexander Shevchenko's presentation, who's the co-founder of Restart Ukraine. And then we will have them both and Paul again for a short Q&A with you, the audience as well, afterwards.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nazar Kovalenko, and I'm working in the Municipal Enterprise Institute of Urban Development. I am director of this organization from Vinica, so greetings from Vinica. I'm really happy to take part in today's event and discussion. I would be happy to present some context and experience of our city and our organization. I'm really thankful to Ukrainian-Netherlands Urban Network, to Tyne and to Alexandra for invitation And I'm really looking forward for discussion after a presentation of me and of my presentation and presentation of my colleagues. So just briefly, I will share some slides. Okay, hope you can see. So, as I said, I am the director of Municipal Enterprise Institute of Urban Development. I will later on try to explain what is the role and the context of our organization. But in general, today you won't see some beautiful plans, maps, illustrations, or some architectural designs, because I will try today to present you the experience of adaptation to the war context and understanding of the future development of specific city and specific organization. So I will share my experience, and it will be more related to some organizational questions, let's say. But I think it's important, and I will hope that it will be useful for you today to discuss this experience, to learn mistakes, maybe to learn some new things, to learn experience. Just briefly, the context of Vinnytsia in the national, let's say, context of the city in the national context, I would say. During last 5 years in Ukraine, the very positive process of decentralization started. That means that the cities receive more rights, more resources, but at the same time more responsibility for their own communities, so local governments. And this creates, especially between big cities, let's say regional capitals in Ukraine, this creates the competition for citizens, competition for investments, competition for businesses. And each city tried to understand this uniqueness, let's say, in this very different Ukrainian context, in Ukraine in general. And what about our city? Our city is trying to position itself as the comfortable and innovative city. And if we talk about the innovation, first of all, this innovation related to the decision-making process, to the governance, let's say, to the institutional capability of the government. So the city tried to invent new ways of solving challenges, new ways of creating some values with restricted resources and institutional background, let's say, with lack of expertise. Try to, through innovation, be more productive and more effective as the local government. And here you can see the, let's say, 4 maybe main documents during last 10 years that try to collect and structure these innovations and create the vision of the city. This context of innovation is of huge importance for our organization, because actually our role is to provide these innovations, to adapt them to the local context, and to create some, let's say, soft changes in the decision-making process, in the bureaucratic structure of city council, to make these innovations functioning and be effective, and provide good projects, provide good decisions, and create better environment in the city. We are focusing on mostly on space that related to climate change adaptation, to urban greenery, to urban spatial transformation, to maybe to mobility and transportation, but also we are very open and focusing on international cooperation, communication, and using international experience and adapt it in our local context. I put 3 interesting, let's say, quotes. Our organization as a mediator between bureaucracy and flexibility. Under this quote, I mean that bureaucracy is always, for them, it's very hard to take innovations and changes, and it's very hard to implement them. And we try to be a soft power within the city council to implement these innovations and slowly but for sure create the action plans how these innovations will function in the future, let's say. Also, as I said, international context is important for us. That's why we usually use some innovations or some projects, some experiences from abroad, sometimes from cities, from other cities in Ukraine, and implement them to local context. Also, we are mediators between public sector and the government because participation instruments are important for us, and we try to create the environment within the city where there is a transparent communication between the active citizens, NGOs, and city council, so they can influence each other. Yes, so as you understand, our organization is mostly, or let's say strictly, about the development, the creation of future vision, the creation of test projects that implement some new ways of thinking, new ways of adaptation and dealing with some challenges. But when the full-scale invasion started, the city totally focuses on the mode of survival, and it was not about the development, it was mostly about the survival aspects of the city, of the community in general. And I put 3 levels of adaptation that our organization went through to understand what could be our mission in this new, very difficult context. First of all, we leave our employees, our colleagues for few weeks to solve their personal problems. For example, to decide whether they want to migrate or whether they want to move their families somewhere in more safe places. Because we understood that to work, you have to, like our colleagues have to deal, get done with their personal things, to be more focused on working processes. Then we try to understand what is the role of city in this context, in this war context, in context of open aggression, because understanding what role city can play, we understood what we as an organization, what part of this role can we fulfill, let's say. So in this context, we rethink our mission and adapt it to existing situation. We understood that city as a military rear play important role for cities that are on the front line. And we, in cooperation with local NGO, created and helped to administrate the humanitarian hub that plays role as the place where the humanitarian aid accumulated and then redistributed to communities that more in need, let's say to Kharkiv, to Chernihiv after the city was recaptured to Ukraine, to Mykolaiv and other smaller communities, let's say. Also, we understood that we as a city, as a transit stop for a lot of internally dispersed persons and refugees, we understood that we have to create the good conditions for them, for living conditions that related to providing some food or other stuff, or even some psychological help. And we started to cooperate with international partners, international organizations that professionally can provide these things, that have more experience, because we obviously have no experience in these questions. And also, as relatively calm site, we support different kind of international delegations, partners who came from abroad to our city to cover the situation, media that cover situation in our city and try to communicate it with the other world, with other countries. We try to support them. As mostly English speakers in our organization, we represented the city and support them, went them to different locations and so on. So we played role of mediation with different guests who came to our city in these difficult times. Once again, for our organization, it was really important and difficult to understand how to focus and going back to our development projects and our development spheres of that we were focused on, in the context when the survival is more important than the development, and you don't have resources, time, and institutional capability for thinking about the future when you thinking about the challenges, huge challenges that happening now with you. And I put three quotes here. I think this is from personal experience and from experience of our organization that are really important, and you don't have to forget, because being only in survival, thinking only about survival aspects are very energy consuming and destructive, because you always have to understand for what you are doing this, and having no future vision or future understanding, future context, it's really very hard to be only on this, let's say, state of mind. This war also is war between future and the past. So we as an organization understood that we have to catch up and continue to support this future vision, adopt this future vision of city development, reconstruct it, let's say, in different topics. But still, we as an organization, for us, and I think for the whole city, it was important not to lose this understanding of future development. And of course, you have to think about the future now, not after war will end it, because a lot of things have to be rethink. You have to think those things. You have to understand what is happening. You have to understand how to adapt to it. You have to plan. You have to rebuild now, not waiting till the war will be ended. And also, I put some part of the cartoon, famous cartoon. I think this really very good express the state of mind of Ukrainians, especially if you go to the context of the government level or level of governance. Really, this is our the thing that the way we are going through is like this, that you even if something was destroyed, you have to rebuild it as fast as possible. To show that despite everything, we will go through these issues that we have here, especially in the context of problems with energy sector. I think this cartoon shows, let's say, have example to our energy engineers, energy experts, people who work with the energy system of Ukraine, how they dealing with the things that happen now. This is, I think, is really good example. So, just few examples. I won't go through because of lack of time in detail, but once again, we understood that we as an organization have to go back to our projects, and even despite the lack of resources, the restrictions of budget, the lack of activity or support from international organizations, because we were strongly oriented from the international support of different organizations, donors, and so on. We try to find things that will help to keep going our initiatives and projects with minimum resources but with maximum results. And here are some examples of our projects and our focuses that we are continuing to support, continuing to working with, continuing to develop and test and so on. And I think it's really important not to forget about despite everything, you have to find resources and abilities to continue work with your projects. And last but not least, just a few lessons learned. You can use these lessons learned to your personal experience, to experience of your organization, to the level or to the context of the city, or even to the level of to the national context. But I think to all of these levels, these lessons learned might be helpful and useful. First of all, for us, this war showed that it was, I think, impossible to be well prepared to it. It was more important, and I think thanks to the decentralization process, thanks to horizontal connections between communities in Ukraine, the flexibility and adaptability is much more important than the level of preparation. It just look at Ukraine and you see that, and you look at Ukrainian communities and you see that it works really like that. Also, as I mentioned, principles of subsidiarity and decentralization was a huge background for us. It was really important that it happened before, because let's say just simple example, our city doesn't waited for some tasks or restrictions from the national level. We understood at the city what resources we have, what kind of role we can play, how it could be useful in the national context, and we just do our job as best as we could with the possibilities that we have. And I think this is related to all of the communities. If we talk about the administrative level, the level of regions or communities, so everyone on the side, they knew what they have to do. Also, in context of our organization, some of us at the beginning saw that they can go to the military service. Some of us saw that they will leave the institute and will be more active as volunteers. But then finally we understood that the best, we can be the most helpful if we will continue to play our role, just adapt our vision to the existing context, but still we can be very useful just doing our job, and it will be as much helpful as it is. And also one important thing, call things as they are. By this quote, I meant that it is important to understand the global context of what is happening, because sometimes some colleagues, even some experts, colleagues from abroad, doesn't really catch it, because this war here is not about the Ukraine itself. It's about the, as I posted in the previous slides, it's about the past and the future. This is about that if we won't stop it here, it will continue to grow to other countries, and that help, especially military help from Western countries, it's not thinking you as the representative of Western country should think about it as an investment, because if we will not stop it here, then right now you have maybe huge economic problems, but later it can be that you will also have to take part in this military conflict, because war will go to the European country, other European country, let's say. So we try to call things as they are. It is important to help Ukraine now. Otherwise, you have to think really how to help yourself. So it's better and more effective to help us, let's say. This is also from the experience that we had here. This is all from my side. I really hope that it was useful for you. Would be happy to answer any questions or comments. So thank you for your attention, and really I hope that some of this experience, I think it's not all, a lot of things and lessons learned we will understand later, after this war will be close to the end or will end. I think we as an organization can share more information, but for now, I hope it was useful for you and you can use it as an example in your context, in context of spatial development, in context of urban development, and so on. So thank you for your attention, and ready to answer any questions.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexander Shevchenko. I'm Ukrainian urbanist, and also I'm the founder of the NGO called Restart Ukraine. Restart Ukraine is a project which emerged in the early weeks of full-scale Russian invasion, and aims to suggest a holistic approach to recovery of Ukrainian cities and municipalities, but thinking from the counter perspective, understanding which processes have changed within the country, what new context we have at the moment. I'm based in Kiev, and with a team of around 10 people from different backgrounds, we work on various tasks and ideas how to improve Ukraine after the war. So basically, through the next 15 minutes, I will share with you the idea of Chernihiv city recovery, which is a city in the north of Ukraine, which was liberated in April this year from Russian armed forces. And I will start with the idea that currently within the country, the recovery has already started. Certain ministries are already practicing some certain activities within the fast recovery approach, helping people with their houses, with the humanitarian support. And this already has started to shape the new phase of Ukraine. And here we actually need to understand that the more resources the ministry has, the more impact to the spatial development it has currently within Ukraine. And we believe that spatial recovery is a function in time where we have like various phases which are different in their specific goal for the recovery. So let's say the phase number one, we call it fast recovery. It is more about humanitarian response, and it is more about stabilizing the life of people on places. The next phase is more about the adaptation, where we bring people back and we provide them not only housing, but also places to work, to live, and social infrastructure which is working and which is in place. It looks like this next phase, number two, will start happening right after the war. And of course, phase number three, those wow projects everybody is awaiting, will happen slightly later, and we need to be prepared for that. And we need to ensure that there is space left for those projects and not everything is built with temporarily housing during the first several years. So this is the idea of this phase-based recovery approach, where for each phase we have a certain MVP, certain minimum viable product, where people have relevant and good and dignified conditions to live in. What does Restart Ukraine suggest, and what do we stand for? It is about data-driven approach in recovery. For that, we created a certain toolbox for Ukrainian municipalities and cities, which they can use for the sake of their recovery during the next years. And to be honest, not always having all the capacity they would need for that. The specialists and the resources, natural resources, the funding. However, this toolkit can make their life a little bit more structured, organized, and give them this new idea for their future. So we have in our toolbox so far 3 instruments, which are the platform for the data analysis, a framework for the recovery, which is a certain manual where the municipality can go step by step. Not to make it very abstract, we developed a certain case study, which I'm going to present right now. So before I go there, I will share with you the methodology we developed for this recovery within 3 phases. We believe that each phase has certain questions to address, and we do not talk about sectors like economics or transport, environment, or social infrastructure. We talk about big cluster questions which need to be solved, and every cluster has some relevant stakeholders involved there. So here, multi-level stakeholder management and multi-level governance is a key to address the holistic approach within the recovery. So going step by step, it is about data collection in the cluster, observe and providing various layers of data on the same space, same place, where stakeholders can get access to them. It is about return of people to relevant typologies of housing placed in relevant places, which is more important even sometimes. It is dealing with the debris and managing them in a way that we can recycle and upcycle and reduce the environmental impact of the war, which is already very big. Then it is about the prediction, looking forward to the upcoming challenges which might arise in the future, Ukrainian cities and municipalities, because recovery of Ukraine is not only about post-war recovery, it is also about post-corona recovery and future-oriented recovery, where challenges such as climate change, then food crisis, and migration crisis might enter our door. Then it is also about the protection of the memory of the war, and also developing a more sound and effective framework for the cultural heritage management and protection. And then from 6 to 9, we have this complex bundle of clusters where we need to address the urban planning in a way which puts the human in the center, and it somehow matches the available resources and finances. It considers the opinion of the people throughout the process, different people and different stakeholders, and then suggests modern, truly modern and contemporary way to build, not only thinking about fast economic effect, but thinking really for the decades ahead. So this is the general logics and approach we combined together with the temporarily framework. So emergency response, we collect the data, we provide data-based shelter solutions. We suggest a principal scheme how to work with debris spatially for the city, where to collect them, how to sort, which technologies to use, and what elements to produce. And then protecting the points of memory, so that we don't up with the shopping mall on the place of really important events which happened during the war. Then we come to the phase of the adaptation. Here we need to address the pre-war issues before we start building and developing. And it is about risk profiling, it is about emergency response to within the city, it's about the evacuation routes, and it's about critical infrastructure and accessibility and connectivity. So we look critical in the city, and we try to now reframe the structure in a way that all the next steps within the big wow projects phase will sit down on a solid basis and will not create any disbalance in the city. So for Chernihiv, we did actually the same way through. So the emergency response, we analyzed the damage according to UNUN satellite. We mapped what kind of buildings were damaged, what kind of materials are they built of, and we came up with 3 areas where the debris could be collected and concentrated, and potentially which kind of future recycled and upcycled objects or materials could be developed. And here we were basing on not only on the experience of the other post-war conditions, but also on the current technologies and current architecture and spatial practices. Speaking about the Reclaim cluster, which is about the return of people or replacement of the people to the new housing conditions, we also look at the data. We map to the all possible solutions available within the city due to different time frames and perspectives, and realized that it is not only modular housing which could be placed on the outskirts of the city, but it is a lot of areas where the IDPs could integrate according to various parameters of the territory we identified for them. So eventually we end up with a more dense, more vibrant city fabric, and people feel themselves better than they used to be before the war, understanding that all the temporary solutions can stay really longer. So we also look for ways to upgrade them to become permanent. The Remember cluster, so we developed a map with the specific points of interest, points of protection, which should definitely be conservated and included to the future built environment development strategy, considering also the soft formats of the memory practices, commemoration, and keeping this alive and ongoing. Then we come to the adaptation phase. And here it is mainly about understanding the risks which are possible to happen within Chernihiv. And here this map gives you an example of invasion to Chernihiv from Russia and Belarus, and the only evacuation route was across the river where the main bridge was blown. So it was in a way a bottleneck which we need to address in the future. So how do we move a river from the barrier to a potential, to a mean of transportation, mobility, or other ways of functional use? Then we also went through this exercise of mapping existing and potential shelters and understanding the buffer around them, that not all the city is covered with the safe areas, and we understand we need to invest more, but how to find this balance between having bomb shelters all around the city and not changing its certain historical, cultural, urban profile. So I understood like there are certain areas which have this priority intervention, where these shelters are needed most of all because of the social infrastructure and public spaces. And we suggested also a number of ways how to integrate them to the existing city environment. Then we come to this subject of improving the city before building it and developing it. And here we see the aspect and issue of accessibility, and where do we actually get stuck within the city, because the war has highlighted all the problems in a hyperbolized manner. So accessibility became at some point very important, where when the public transportation was not working and people needed to reach, for instance, a pharmacy, and it was not in a walking distance. And there are much more such examples. So how do we reduce barriers so the people can freely navigate, evacuate, and understand their city better? So we also mapped the barriers and tried to understand where specifically, according to their user experience, so we can suggest any solutions. And then based on all this logical chain of problem, area of solution, point of solution, type of solution, we end up with several ideas which, like a snowball, form the new profile for the city. So understanding the 15-minute walk city, not only to leisure areas, but also to the critical infrastructure, showed the blind spots where there is not enough infrastructure or not good access to this infrastructure. And then we come to the sustainable development, which is not, in our opinion, only about building whatever we want because we have money, but it is about addressing more complex issues in a more complex and sophisticated and well thought way. So, for instance, the two opposite issues which we have in the city is the heat island and the great presence of blue and green infrastructure. And we clearly understand how they are opposing each other in a way that the industrial zone has higher temperatures because there is no greenery or other areas which cool the city down. And this also interconnects with the micro mobility, pedestrian, bicycle mobility within the city, which gives also an understanding where it is not accessible or where it is not popular, and suggests us how to create this structure of green and blue lines which sew the city together again. Based on this frame and structure, we can identify specific places and specific projects where they can even overlap with other functions. So this type of approach, in our understanding, allows us to be more effective with the limited resources with our solutions, because we believe that this urban acupuncture can save budget money, but also can increase the quality of comfort and finally will provide the shift from this this leadership-based decisions to the data-based decisions. And of course, the very important aspect we need to consider is how do we return economics back to a city which is like 50 kilometers from Russian border, and how we shift from the commodity economics to added value economics. And this industrial zone and suggesting new types of activities there should encourage the market to be more creative and allow new sectors which are already emerging after the war, during the war, to enter the city and to be present there. Of course, there are points where we have a mix of functions, and this is something we are definitely eager to cultivate. And there we suggested some more detailed solutions based on existing buildings, and where we can either refunction or build a new one, considering the existing profile of the city, as I already said. So, and then we moved slightly to this important point of a human-oriented city, which is a city of people, not city of houses and constructions. And we understand that we need to cultivate these communities in a way, finding out where are the places the communities belong, where are the boundaries, informal boundaries. And we have done such experiments, such exercise, and identified where exactly are the communities and where could be this point of growth and what kind of function could be placed there. And of course, it has a certain flexibility, but as we mentioned previously, participation is definitely something to put on board and to integrate to the design and development, not to make it very much top-down or exclusive or closed. And last but not least, thinking really cross-sector, not in the silos, allows us create and tap the potential of various functions. So for instance, in the city center providing a part of pedestrian street immediately connected together iconic objects which will be restored and recovered, and allows a city to rethink and reassess its city center, combining different functions and developing a certain hub instead of numerous monofunctional objects. So, but still we have very many questions to answer. It is about the scale question. How do we see the recovery, not only the recovery of the objects, but recovery of the districts, of the cities? How do we, based on data, but not cover various approaches behind the digitalization, because digitalization per se is not a good thing. And how do we empower local government to be able to work with such approaches and increase their capacity? And how do we actually navigate across the sector, the stakeholders within such approach? Because only professional community is not enough for that. The central government, the donors, the international organizations, the local administration should be all in this loop. And at this point, I will stop with my presentation, and will be looking forward to your questions for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Shevchenko. I'm Ukrainian urbanist, and also I'm the founder of the NGO called Restart Ukraine. Restart Ukraine.
That now Netherlands are trying to give this different perspective to the regions and give opportunity to show the differences. And then we had a very different presentation from very different cities with different identities, which one of them was not so much influenced like directly by the war, but became a hub on the backside of the war. And then another city that suffered a lot from invasion, And there was also another interesting link that all the three presentations had about the future, that you in the beginning said that what we really need is a future. And then Nazar was saying, you have to think about future, otherwise like it's why you keep doing it, why you keep standing. And then we got this very methodological presentation from Alexander, and he, in one of his presentation, said like, we need to give a space, to leave a space for the future projects, like to react now, but reserve some space for the future. And my question to you, Paul, now would be like, also having a link with another question, what do you think about situation in Ukraine? After this two presentation, what kind of reflection you have on that?
Well, first of all, I'm really inspired by the two presentations. I think it's very close to what Timothy Snyder put forward, in the sense that there's really a kind of other generation that is showing its face, and that this generational change is very important, and actually I think in both presentations also became clear that there's this kind of possibility for a sort of civic renaissance in this kind of future. And this is, of course, also very inspiring, I would say, also for the Netherlands. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit for the sake of the argument, but I thought this climate strike image was quite striking, in the sense that actually we need that kind of action as well. And I think it's very clearly put that by Nazar, that this is actually not a war somewhere at the edge of Europe, but this is really very central to where we are in. And then I'm also very much inspired by all of the points that are taken up into this change, and the need for direct action, midterm recovery, and real transitional spaces, all based on sort of new premises. And I think that's very inspiring. So I can only be inspired by these two presentations. Yes.
Is there any question in the audience at this point for any of our speakers, or maybe to all of them?
Hello, thank you very much for all the presentations, really inspiring. And I think my question can be addressed to all of you, because as we all know, all the changes start in the small group of professionals, within a small group of professionals. But in order to actually to get to the final point and be successful in all these changes, we need to engage general public. How would you introduce all this information, and how would you deliver the message to general public so they understand what are the steps, how can they be engaged, and what are the changes can be done within life of every individual so it will affect the outcome?
Maybe we could start with the guys in Ukraine. Nazar, do you have anything to say about this?
Actually, yes. Hello once again to everyone. Well, it's a good question, and we also tried not to forget about it, that it's hard to do some changes. Let's say this war, the context of war, also open a huge potential for changes, because you finally tell to yourself that a lot of things, let's say in urban planning, in urban development, can be as they used to be. So they have to change. And the war gives the opportunity to change them. And actually, we try to communicate also with public, try to test some innovations and try to engage them, because, you know, it's in Ukraine, despite all the things that happened, there are a huge wave of feeling that you want to participate, you want to do something that brings us closer to win this war, that do some things around better. And we just try to catch this feeling of the public, try to feel this feeling, let's say, in this local context, and a little bit direct it to maybe to our projects, or to see that there are good background and readiness of public to other projects. So we just try to analyze it at least and feel it and catch it when it's really on a high level, let's say.
Thank you. Alexander, I know your initiative is quite active in public media.
Yes, thank you. I think the question is good, but this war has highlighted also not only the weaknesses of the country or of the infrastructure, but in my opinion, it also highlighted the maybe a bit old-fashioned way of participation we were doing before the war, working for such projects as Nazar was mentioning, integrated urban development, for instance, for several cities. I now understand that yes, it is important to involve people, and participation is one of our clusters. However, we need to understand like appropriate role of the civic society, because in my opinion, urban planning is something a little bit more complex, you know, than addressing the like the fires in the field. So it's not like to buy something and to deliver it somewhere. It's a bit more complex and systematic, and I think participation should go beyond this open microphone where everybody can say I like this and I don't like this, because modeling that, I immediately imagine that we will end up nowhere, because we will have so many different opinions that we will not be able to put it in this single concept. So I think starting from such small collectives as us, and we're not the only one actually. So starting from there, we can actually think of several appropriate approaches where we can foresee a certain role of civic society as an advocate of transparent recovery from one side, and from other side, they are actually the best experts in the local context and in the local knowledge. So to make it more of context-based recovery, understanding that we definitely meet the request from the local society, and we address the real problems. Because the fact is that if we think future, as Paul said, as Nazar said, civic society does not always understand what will come in 2 years and 5 years, and sometimes it's really hard to explain that. So I'd be rather careful here, but definitely participation is a must.
Thank you. And Paul?
Well, yeah, I think also, first of all, I think this as far as I can understand, of course, looking very much from the outside, I think this kind of change, of course, happened already before the war. So I think that kind of, it's also good to look at the experiences you've had in the country with other types of projects. And I think it's perhaps also a point of exchanging more experiences amongst each other. That could be definitely one of the functions of the urban network, I think. My personal experience recently, particularly with the voucher project, which gave very much the power to organized groups, let's say, so not necessarily individuals, but like small organized groups of individuals, was that actually, and you allow them to cope with real transition issues, that gives, you would be amazed, let's say, what kind of knowledge, what kind of ambition, what kind of forward-looking perspectives they bring to the table. And of course, it's not the only thing to do. So it's literally a very layered approach that you would need always. So, but let's say if you leave that part out, I think it's crucial, so you don't manage afterwards. Yeah.
There is one more question here.
Hi, my name is Indri. I have two questions, actually, one for Paul and one for Alexander and Nazar. But I'll go one for Paul. Based on your presentation, so you had this from 1998, Deltametropol, and up till now, do you see, from your opinion, do you see if there is an integrated approach between climate, energy, and spatial planning as well, all in once?
If I see it.
If you see it's happening in the Netherlands, at least from your perspective, from the 98 up till now.
Too little, too late.
Do we have a chance to move forward with this?
Yes.
Okay. Right,
Maybe
good answer.
Question to that.
Yes, and the other question for Alexander and Nazar. I've seen you presented the 9 methodologies, and I think they're very nice and quite appropriate approach to your situation. But I'm thinking again, if you have a magic wand and you can make one thing happen from all those methodologies and approach, what would that be?
Yeah, I guess I need to answer here first. I would definitely establish an effective and transparent dialogue between the stakeholders. So kind of effective multi-level governance is the key to all these things, because definitely all these 9 clusters come from either needs or trends or local administration or professional community. You can see, you can hear, and it can be not 9, it could be 15. And if we build a system where actually these needs are heard and then effectively cascaded to the financial architecture and to potential investments from various sides, it can be an entire working system. So for me, this is the key, and this is something we try to advocate.
There was a question in the middle there, or two in the middle.
Thank you very much for all these 3 presentations. It was really, really interesting. And I have also a couple of questions. One for Paul, short question. What is the biggest obstacles to bring innovations in the Netherlands? Because obviously not everything happening immediately, right? And according to your words, it's quite slow, but what the biggest obstacle?
Well, maybe continuing a little bit from the previous question, I think a lot has to do with behavior. So we really can change, and we can change quite quickly if we want to, or if we need to. Or
you mean society behavior?
Hmm?
Do you mean society behavior or
yes,
governmental
society,
behavior?
Well, and of course it goes down to the individual, but of course society plays a role. Like an individual never makes the difference, but societies can make the difference. So I think that is a very crucial role, and these changes can be tremendous. It's unbelievable what is possible. So therefore, quite strong yes.
Thank you very much. And yeah, Nazar and Alexander, thank you very much for your job. What you are doing is really important for Ukraine nowadays. And question for both of you. There's like many other groups who trying to look forward to develop our cities, to develop our country. Do you have any collaborations with other groups, and how it goes? And the second question is, all this idea need to be heard, need to be seen, and do you have sort of governmental support, or do you have an idea how to reach that level?
Maybe I can start and start from second question about the support of the government. I hope that this thing will change, but right now it's like on the local level, it's easier to start something and move something than expecting the support from the national level. Because of course there are questions right now that national level have to think about, military stuff and so on. But cities, communities more flexible, and also our case showed for us it's much easier to go and find some, for example, direct connections with partner cities abroad, let's say, or partner organizations or donors, have it directly, than expecting that they came to and start some negotiations, for example, with national level, with the government, with some ministries, and then ministries bring it down to cities. So, and I think it's a strength from one side of Ukraine, because cities are more active and more, let's say, yeah, more active. But on the other way, I guess this thing that the national level, it's a bit weak in this kind of thing. All the time we have problem, and there is no connection or good communication between local level and national level. It's sometimes hard to create some legal framework for cities. The dialogue is working not very well, and yeah, it's a bit of weakness, let's say.
And about other groups?
About the other groups, we try to be, as, for example, in our case, let's say, I would say about our organization, we try to be very focused, because in context of our city, a lot of challenges and a lot of groups on the national, let's say, groups that try to, like Alexander, try to create some general context that every community can use. There are really a lot of such kind of groups, but we try to find one or two focuses, let's say in housing policy, and working really, like going deep to this focus and create collaborations with, I don't know, with other cities, other organizations, or even partners abroad. It's still not very like functioning well, but still we try to find these focuses at first, and then see with who we can collaborate to bring more effectiveness and more sense to those things.
Thank you.
Maybe you can pass the microphone.
And Alexander?
Yeah, I will try to be short here. So my answer here will also start from the second question. Looking for support from the government, we don't talk here about financial support, because it's not the priority for the country. The money goes, where it goes. However, the support is now about, starting to bring NGOs to the table, because like if you would ask this question a few months ago, the recovery of the country would be very exclusive circle of stakeholders who talk about this with the external actors, which is basically the government and the president's office. And we have a situation right here where we have the Ministry of Regional Development, which was merged to the Ministry of Infrastructure, a very interesting situation from the management point of view. And where on the level of the top management, we don't have any urban planners or architects, which means that they don't see this sector of civic society, of the third sector of the NGOs, as a relevant support, because from many of them, through third persons, I hear that they are looking for solutions. They are looking for support, but they don't really understand who is the provider of such support within the country. So, and this leads to your first question that my personal opinion is that time for cooperation or collaboration, maybe it's not now, it's a bit later, because right now, actually, the third sector, the NGOs, need to come up with something different from what is done by local administrations and governments, and it needs to take the time, as Nazar said, for the focus, to develop an idea to make it a solid product. Because if you come with the generic ideas to the discussion and to the cooperation, sometimes it is dissolved. And so it is good for such organizations to go through some certain period when they focus on something and develop something, and if they're still alive, then they can cooperate, and it really creates synergy. Because from what we saw at the very first month, that people were like cooperating, uniting in groups of 1,000, 2,000 of relevant like professionals. However, it didn't result in the exponential result.
Let's go to a last question.
Thank you. Part of it is already answered. The question I was really intrigued by this 9 cluster approach, which seemed to me like more of a dream scenario rather than the actual reality on the ground. Because obviously we know the dirt and the terrible things of how things get mixed up, how finance in the end is not number 7, it's perhaps more number 2 or number 1, and how things are messier in reality. And I think that's also, if you look at the Netherlands in the post-war area, it's also more messy than we like it to think about it. That brings me to the question of agency, and that was partially answered now. How do you see your own agency, and also the difference between the 2 approaches that you sketch? How do you broker the 2? Because I mean, I have sympathy for the Amish barn in the sense that that is the most likely scenario. But how could we mix or merge the 2 versions where there is some form of cluster and there is also perhaps the inevitability of the Amish barn?
Maybe Nazar.
Oh, sorry, this question to me. Sorry, I didn't catch the question. Could you repeat?
The question is, what can you learn from Alexander, and Alexander, what can you learn from Nazar?
Tricky question. I would say, first of all, on the global level, it is good to have such kind of methodology. But really, in context of Ukraine, just one city and the neighboring city in 50 kilometers just have sometimes such a different context that you really have to be careful to see these proposals of methodologies, how to adapt to your case, because as you mentioned, sometimes you should jump and really think about whether financing, or whether building communication, or whether just analyzing and so on. So going top down and see the context. And sometimes some aspects are more crucial and important, and some you can just jump and go through and make it much more quickly, because the country is huge. The war brings damage very differently to different countries. Even, for example, our city and cities in western part of Ukraine that also were not so damaged, it's also totally different context. And you just have to really be careful with that. And once again, I said that really have to think about the future now and do something now, but still in the long-term perspective of development, long-term vision, you have to take time and understand what is happening and how it influences your context, and what is more suitable, what kind of methodology is more suitable to your context. I think we should be careful that after win, just to the next day start rebuild, start put a lot of money, and to rebuild everything, it's a bit dangerous. You need to take time and plan really carefully. I hope I answer a bit of your question.
I will try to be short and not to repeat what was maybe already said. Definitely, there are different typologies of cities and municipalities according to their proximity to the battlefields, and what we experience right now, not in direct link with Chernihiv, but in general within our work, that a certain urban profiling needs to be done every time. So there is no one-fit-all approach, absolutely. And like Vinny says, slightly different context, which requires different approach. Maybe I'll just comment on the clusters that, you know, it's not the order, it's the right ingredients to the soup. On the opposite to you know, just doing different types of things in different ministries or different departments without coordination to each other. And unfortunately, in Ukraine, we still can draw strategies without looking on the map, which is a big problem.
Thank you. Actually, yeah, we need to wrap up a bit since we're already, this beautiful gadget tells us that we're a bit out of time already. But yeah, we organize these events also to have this exchange between Netherlands and Ukraine. And then my very last question to wrap it up would be for Paul, like, what have you learned today? What could Netherlands get out of these two presentations from Ukraine? And to Alexander and Nazar, like, what did you learn today and what will you take with you from this event?
Shall I start? Yeah, so I've learned a lot, and basically I think also going to the last question that was coming from the audience, I think, of course, these two stories are actually quite close to each other, and they're talking about how to organize indeed actions to be taken on the ground with people who are involved. I think that is the one big lesson I think we need to realize, and I think the big danger is the rather let's say the bigger companies with the big silver bullet solutions. I would say that is quite clearly now again, I would say the bigger challenge that we would like to avoid. These playing a very important role in this change, I think.
And what could Netherlands take out of this?
Well, that is something to learn from, right? I mean, currently we're building a huge hydrogen infrastructure to cope with our energy transition problem, and it's the biggest mistake you could think of. And that's just one small example.
And Alexander, since you're now on the big screen.
Yeah, I see myself. No, I would say that there is a huge untapped potential for Netherlands and Ukraine to research in the component of the resilient city, because Netherlands have never been stable, have always been faced with multi-factored challenges and pressures, and been a very dynamic environment. Like Paul mentioned, the swamps some few centuries ago. So that I think there is a very practical space for cooperation, how not to, you know, build solid big infrastructure but remain resilient, flexible and able to respond quickly to the challenges, not only the war.
Thank you. And Nazar?
Yeah, I'll try not to repeat, but maybe some common thoughts. I just catch up from Paul's presentation, the thing that he mentioned about that everything is under control in Netherlands, everything is ordered, let's say. At least from our point of view, from Ukrainian point of view, everything is really like in order and well planned and looks solid. On the contrary, the question from somebody from the audience asked about what is about the urban planning in Ukraine. It's really chaotic. It's a chaos. But at some point of view, this chaos, that everything is not solid, somehow help us to be more flexible. So I think for both context, for Netherlands, context of Netherlands and Ukraine, it's good really to be flexible, not to be very solid, and not to be very chaotic, because if you are flexible and you're, I don't know, have some stress test, or you will be ready to any kind of issues that may be appeared sometimes, any kind of black swamps that will appear, and you will be more ready than you are if you are very solid, or if you are in a very chaotic context. So yeah, once again, flexibility from personal and from context, personal context and context of our city, flexibility really helps. That's it.
You. And thank you very much to the audience. That you found time in this busy pre-Christmas schedule, and for those who came here also despite of the physical health, especially to Paul. Thank you very much. Yeah, and see you on the following events that we will have next year.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.